Good afternoon. In our next series of videos on what is a drone, we will be talking about the professional drones today. In our last video clip that we did, we talked about the micro drones, the really small drones that are really fun to fly, and they're relatively inexpensive. You can go from $20 to $50 to $99 drones on up maybe a few $100s for something like the Mavic Mini. But now we're going to move on into drones that are more in the professional realm of things. And we're going to start out with this very first drone that I have here in front of us. This one is called the Phantom 3 Pro. The Phantom series of drones is kind of the Model T, the Model A car of the early car history. The Phantoms were the first drones that were really built that had cameras put on board. Initially, the early flyers of these drones, the early pilots, would put GoPro cameras underneath their drone and then do some photography. Once companies like DJI found out that this was a unique opportunity to do photography from the air, then they started to develop special cameras that would fit on the front of these drones. And this particular drone has a very nice camera in it. Now this drone is one of the first drones that I've ever purchased. So it was used early on in my professional drone flying career. And it's been around for a few years. It's no longer in production. They've moved up to the Phantom 4 series. Looks very similar in design. It just has better motors, better camera, better sensors on that drone. But this one I still enjoy flying. It takes beautiful imagery with this camera right here. And let's talk about some of the specifications of the Phantom 3 professional drone. This drone weighs 1,280 grams. It has a ascent rate of about 5 meters per second, so it can fly very quickly high into the air. Its flight time is approximately 23 minutes. Here's one of the batteries that fits into the drone. These batteries are intelligent batteries. There is a computer chip on board this battery, and it slides into the back of the drone. This battery is a 4,480 milliamp battery. So once we slide it into the back of the drone and it connects with the drone, then the drone can be powered up from the battery. So we'll go ahead and do that and power cycle this drone for you just for a moment. And so this drone is now has its own power. You will notice that there are some lights that are kicking on. This makes this drone easy to fly in the early morning or later in the evening. Officially by FAA rule, you can fly drones 1/2 hour before sunrise and 1/2 hour after sunset unless you have a special exemption. So this is a Phantom 3 drone. It has downward sensing capabilities, so there are some cameras on the very, very bottom of this drone. You will notice as I move the drone, the gimbal of the camera wants to stay very, very level. And that is the advantage of these kinds of drones. They take beautiful, smooth, cinematic photography, and that has changed the entire photography industry. So people can go out and shoot video with this. This camera does do 4K video, and it has a 12 megapixel digital still camera. So it takes beautiful photos and video. And I've used it extensively all over the country, from Florida to South Carolina to Michigan, and of course a lot of flying here in Indiana. So this was my very beginning drone that I have. When you take off these drones, you'll notice, if you look closely, the propellers on these drones have different colors on them. Here are the black propellers. Here are the silver ones. They are opposite, and when they spin up, which we'll demonstrate later on outside, when they spin up, these two propellers spin in the same direction, and these two spin in the same direction opposite to these. So you have to be careful when you put your propellers on that you are putting them on the correct place. They are unique for each of the motors. This drone has a limited range of about 2 miles. So I've flown it out, out over the Ohio River, out over the Atlantic Ocean, Lake Superior in Michigan. I've flown it in several locations where I've extended its range. It does not have as good as video transmission back to the controller as some other of the more modern drones. Speaking of the controller, here is the controller for the Phantom 3, and later on we will mount a iPad onto the top of this controller and show you what that looks like. You can see 2 antennas in the back that extend the range of this drone. Like all the drones that are flown with joysticks, the one on the left controls your altitude up and down. It speeds up or slows down the motors. And it also controls something called yaw, which means the drone moves to the right or moves to the left, all right, with that stick. This right-hand stick controls the way the drone will fly forward or backwards. So you can push forward on this stick and the drone will fly forward like this, or pull back and it will fly backwards, or it can fly to the right or fly to the left. So it deals with pitch and roll. Those are key words in aviation. So you have yaw, which is like turning right and left. Then you have pitch up, pitch down, and then you have roll, which goes this way or this way. And this is how these drones all fly, very similar to what other aircraft have to do when they're flying. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get them outside and demonstrate some flight characteristics. So this is our first drone that we had, the Phantom 3 Professional. It came in a box like this. Hopefully you can see the box okay. I ordered this one directly from the factory back when it was brand new. So these drones, back then it was about $1,400 for that drone, for this drone. And if you want an extra battery, they were a little over $100 a piece for the batteries. So the batteries are not cheap on these drones because of the fact they have microelectronics on them. So that concludes this first lesson, or first drone that we will talk about. In a few minutes, we'll talk about the latest drone that we have. Our next drone that we will talk about that are categorized as professional drones is this one right here. And this is called the Mavic 2 Pro. The Mavic 2 Pro is kind of the standard of drones today. You will notice that it is a lot smaller than the Phantom drone. That's one of its advantages. Being smaller allows it to fly a little bit longer, and it is more portable. You will notice the propellers will fold up on this drone. Unlike the Phantom's propellers, I can fold them up, and then I can fold the legs in on this drone. and it can be stored in a very small bag that I have. So this drone, when stored, looks about like this. Okay, it's a very small package. You will notice the controller that comes with this is also very small. So they wanted to have a drone that you could take with you a lot of places. And this drone, I have had this one all over the country, including in Seattle, Arizona. I have had it in Michigan, flown it in Florida, flown it a lot here in Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky. So it's been around and flown a lot. It has a lot of hours on it that I've flown it. I've had this one for several years now. Let's talk about some of the specifications of the Mavic 2 Pro. One of the advantages of this drone is its camera. This camera right here is one of the best cameras on drones in the world. Let's go ahead and power the drone up, and you will see the camera go through a calibration, what is called a gimbal calibration. Okay, it makes a little sound telling you that it is powered up. And this camera is called a Hasselblad camera. The Hasselblad camera company originates in Germany. And if you know a little bit about the history of men walking on the moon, the cameras that the Apollo astronauts took to the moon was made by the company called Hasselblad. So the optics of this camera is one of the best, and even though it is very, very small, don't let that small camera fool you. It can take beautiful 4K imagery, video imagery, and it can take 20 megapixel still imagery. I will probably show you in this video a few snapshots that I've taken with this camera from all over the United States. So it's a very, very good camera that you can see here. The Mavic 2 Pro also has multiple sensors all around it. So next to the camera, you will notice there are two smaller cameras here in front. That is for front sensors. There are sensors on the side, one right here, a sensor in the back, one right here, another one on this side, and then on the bottom of this drone, you can see two sensors and also a camera and a couple of other sensors that sense the ground, and also an LED light, a very, very bright light, so that when you're flying it in darker conditions, this light comes on and you can see it from a long range. This drone has an effective range of about 4.5 miles. I've flown it out to about 4 miles, a little over 4 miles before. But you're supposed to keep them within your line of sight, so most of my flying, when I'm doing it for a job, I can see the drone all the time. And this drone has been used by a lot of people around the world as a drone that can take beautiful imagery and get in really close to objects because of the sensors. When these sensors kick on and it gets close to an object, the drone is smart enough to be able to stop flying. So you cannot fly this one into a wall of a house or into a tree or into some other objects. You still have to be careful of power lines. I'm always cautious around power lines. I never have tested this to see if I could see a power line with the sensors or not. I don't want to put that to the test. So anytime I'm around power lines, I fly away visually to stay away from that. So this drone has a maximum takeoff altitude of 6,000 meters, so you can even fly it at the top of a mountain. It will have a maximum flight time of about 31 minutes if there is no wind. You can hover it for about 29 minutes. I usually get somewhere between 20 and 25-minute flights out of this drone. So this drone has also something called OcuSync. OcuSync means that it's broadcasting a video quality back to the controller. You'll notice this controller is much smaller, and we'll show you this in more detail in a few minutes, but it's broadcasting that back, and you'll hook either an iPad or a phone to this controller, and also a display on this controller that gives you telemetry, knowing where you're at on altitude. This controller also has a lot of little buttons on it that allow you to do certain things, which include hitting it and it will come back to what is called home, the place where it takes off. It knows where it's at. This drone, just like the Phantom drone, does hook to satellites in outer space. This one will hook up to 18 satellites, and it knows its position very, very well. When I go to land it, I usually have a landing mat or some place to land. When it takes off, the cameras on the bottom actually take a picture of the ground where it took off, and then as it lands, the processor on board, the computer on board, will actually compare that photo to what it's seeing as it's coming down, and it will readjust. This drone will land within 2 or 3 inches of where it took off. So it's a very, very effective drone. It's actually the second Mavic that I've owned. When the first Mavic came out, the Mavic 1, I purchased that drone. Then I sold that one and bought this one because of the beautiful camera that it has on board. This right now is my work drone. This is the one I do the most of drone photography with right now, because its ability to get into small areas or fly very fast or fly very slow. This drone has 3 modes. Tripod mode, which means it'll move extremely slow, normal mode, and then it does have a sport mode, and I can fly it over 45 miles per hour in sport mode setting. So it's a very, very good drone. One of the other things this drone can do, and we won't talk much about this, is it can connect to this headset goggles. So I can put on these goggles and turn them on, turn the drone on, and I can see through the goggles what the camera sees. Now, normally I use the phone or an iPad to see that, but this gives you a completely different perspective, and you can only see what the drone is seeing. So when you use goggles, you should always take a second person with you, okay? A person using their eyes to make sure you're not going to fly into a power line. The disadvantage of goggles is you cannot look left or right or behind the drone to see what is there. You're only looking forward all the time. So it's kind of fun. If you ever put goggles on when you're flying either these kinds of drones or the racing drones, they can make you dizzy a little bit until you get used to them. So it takes some time to get used to them. Both the Phantom drone and the Mavic drone have to be registered with the FAA. Okay, it's very important that everyone understands there are laws controlling the drones in American airspace. Even though I can fly these drones very high, they are limited to 400 feet above the ground. Never fly a drone above 400 feet above the ground, or you are breaking the law, and potentially can cause a very, very serious catastrophic accident by hitting an aircraft that's flying higher than 400 feet. If I have to fly close to an airport, then I need to have FAA permission to do so. And only an FAA remote pilot that has passed a test can fly close to airports like Indianapolis or Cincinnati, for example. So these drones can be dangerous because of the fact that they are very large. These are not the largest drones that I've flown. There are even larger ones. They're more expensive, And many people are using even bigger ones for shooting Hollywood movies and other types of video that you may see on television and in the movie theater. So this is the two big drones that I use, the professional drones. I have multiple batteries for each of these drones so that when I go out and do a job, I can be on location for several hours shooting thousands of photos. This drone, I did a job in Greenwood a few months ago where it mapped an entire field. That field's going to be converted into a sports complex later on here over the next few months. And the surveyor that got this map from me, said I did this in 2 hours. It would have taken him 2 months to survey that ground. So drones can be used for a lot of great purposes. We see a lot of crazy things online, like people trying to put weapons on them, people trying to lift things with them. There's just no way that anyone should be trying to do that. You need to follow the rules. The FAA does have a website for drone uses. And if you want to become a professional pilot, you must be 16 years of age. And then you can take the drone pilot's exam. It's one of the hardest tests I've ever taken in my life. It's very similar to what a private pilot would have to take to fly a private aircraft. So there's a lot of information you need to know that I'm not covering in this course about flying drones. Drones can be fun. Drones can be used for business. Drones can be used for saving lives. Drones never should be used for causing harm or invading someone's privacy. So this kind of wraps up this portion of the video. We're going to show you how these drones fly and some examples of the photography that these drones can have in the last part of this video. I hope you have enjoyed this series. This is the third in the series of videos on drone technology. Our next video that we will have next time will have an article there about racing drones and show you what those look like, and also drones that have wings. So stay tuned for that coming up here in a little over a week. So for now, we're going to cut this short, and then we'll come back in a few moments and show you what these drones look like when we're trying to control them. Okay, for the next several minutes, I'd like to show you a little bit about how these drones are controlled. We have hooked up the Mavic 2 Pro to its controller and a small iPad, an iPad mini, okay? Smaller iPad. The larger iPads will not work. The screen will not connect to this display. You can use an iPad mini or a phone to be able to look at the screen, what the camera is looking at. So you can see right here is the drone. Okay, so I'm moving the drone up, and we can look at the drone right here, or put the drone back on the table. Whatever the drone is looking at, we can see it right here on the screen. There's several things I'd like for you to look at. Now I am doing this inside, but the drone is trying to hook to satellites out in outer space. As of this moment, it's picked up about 9 satellites. Up here across the top, it gives me information about the battery, how much signal strength I have, both with the controller and also with the video.
The home point has been updated. Please check it on the map.
And you do hear this lady talking to you. It does establish where it's at in outer space here on planet Earth. So she just went through that process. Normally it goes faster when you're outside, but being indoors right now, it takes a few minutes to do that. You will also notice that there are other buttons here on the left. This one is how you take the drone off. You'd actually hit that button and it would take off and start to fly. On the right-hand side, all these little buttons here help us when we are shooting video or digital photography, and then across the top, it tells us the different settings for the camera. So right now, I'm shooting a digital picture, so I'll go ahead and have the drone shoot one image, and you can hear it click just like it would be on a normal camera. And the image was saved to a small camera card that's located on the side of the drone. I can then take that card out, hook it to a computer, and look at that image a little bit later on. If I flip this, then you'll notice it changed slightly, and now I'm in movie mode. And if I hit the red button, it would start taking digital movies in 4K. You can see it says 4K at 30 frames per second. I can take 1 hour, 22 minutes, 57 seconds of movies in this setting, okay? So there's a lot of different settings just in the cameras that I can use to flip back and forth for this drone. Also, in the lower right-hand corner, you can see a little map. This tells me where the drone is at on planet Earth, or where it's flying over, and I can then actually flip the map and look at the map as the drone gets further away from me, or go right back to the FPV, the first-person view settings. At the very bottom of the screen, you can see information of how far the drone is away from its home point. It's normally it would say 0 here when you take off, and how high the drone is in altitude. Right now it says 0 feet. The very, very bottom tells you its speed in miles per hour for horizontal speed and also vertical speed. So horizontal speed would be going across the ground, and vertical speed would be climbing up into the air. All right. And then this last little thing, it looks like a little compass with north, tells you kind of the direction the drone is facing. If I spin the drone a little bit, you'll actually see it changing on the compass. This drone does have a built-in compass, all right, or multiple compasses, so it knows which way north, south, east, and west is on the map. So there's a lot of little settings. I could spend probably 2 hours just showing you how you set one of these drones up. There's some buttons up here that I can actually live stream this drone. I've done it before. You can live broadcast to Facebook or YouTube or other media sources. So we've done that in the past. And you can just play around with a lot of these settings here that you see with the drone. It does have something called multiple modes. We'll look at those just for a second. And so you can fly it in normal mode, or I can put it into what is called a hyperlapse. The hyperlapse mode will let us see different things. It could circle, it could course lock, it can do waypoint. It's kind of a neat hyperlapse mode. We can get into what is called quick shot mode, and I normally can't show this to you unless I'm in the air, but it can do what are called dronies, not selfies, but dronies. I did one on a previous video for this past week where the drone looks at a subject and then flies directly away from that subject and gains altitude. This also has active track here at the bottom, active track, which means if you're on your bicycle, I could lock on you on the bicycle and then the drone would follow you all around. It has something called point of interest, which means I could look at your house. I want to take some images of your house, and it can circle your house. It also has something called waypoints. Waypoints is a way to pre-fly the drone in a pre-designed pattern, so it can go from one point to the next, and it actually flies itself. So we'll go ahead and get out of waypoints in the tutorial there. So there's a lot of little settings here. We don't show all of those. It has even a tap to fly, where you can tap on the screen and it will fly to wherever you touch on the screen. It will fly to that location. And then cinematic mode, which makes everything nice and smooth, and it takes beautiful videos, okay? So these are called multiple flight modes for the drone, and they are used a lot when you're trying to make a nice, clean photography and let the drone kind of fly itself. The drone can fly better than most pilots can fly and keep everything nice and smooth. Then I can look at all these images later on in a different screen. I can actually edit the videos right here on the iPad, and I can look at what I've shot in the past, and I can make a quick movie. I can then upload that movie to YouTube or Facebook or other social media, so you can see some of the images I've shot in the past. You can make a quick movie if you want to do that, or you can look at your albums of different things that are already there. So there's a lot of neat shots that you can do with these kinds of drones. Again, these are professional drones. It takes a lot of practice and time to learn all of the settings. So this is what the Mavic 2 Pro looks like. The Phantom 3 looks very, very similar on its design, on using the software. This uses an app, a free app for the iPad or for your phone called DJI Go 4 Fly app, and it allows you to fly the drone through the iPad. Also, one other thing I did not show you is the screen that is right on the controller. It also gives me information and telemetry that you can see at a glance of what kind of mode it's in, how far away it is, the battery strength, all that information, how fast it's flying in miles per hour. Also, its RPMs, how fast the propellers are spinning. All that information is there for me on the screen, so if I need to look at it in a quick glance, I can do that. So I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial on the software that controls these drones. The next thing we will do is actually go outside and fly one. Now we're going to demonstrate the large white drone. This is the DJI Phantom 3 professional drone. So we're going to go ahead and initiate a takeoff.
The home port has been updated.
Okay, the last drone we're going to demonstrate is the Mavic 2 Pro drone that we showed you earlier. So we have it outside. We'll go ahead and initiate a takeoff. You'll notice that you hear a lot of beeping. That's because the sensors know that we are close to the drone, and so the drone will actually sense us up this close. As we move away, then the sensors are changing. We'll go ahead and video some things here for you.